You know what's always, without fail, a terrible idea in the world of Fallout? Letting computers run anything. We have so many examples where this has gone wrong. From amusement parks to defense systems, it almost always goes pear-shaped. Sometimes it's been decades or even centuries after Armageddon. But today, we get one of those rare, juicy examples where it all went wrong, and for once, the end of the world wasn't to blame. Today, we're taking a look at the New England Technocrat Society, an area added in the recent next-gen update to Fallout 4. Here we learn of a group of supposed pro-technology socialites with an element of possible counter-capitalism, and how their plans for a Halloween party either got them all killed or worse. Now, I'll be straight with you. There was an element of human stupidity in there as well, but the AI definitely takes some responsibility for the initial actions, and certainly for everything that happened later. So relax, put your feet up, and let me tell you all about it. This video is a shorter one to tide you all over until the compilation video on schools in the Commonwealth is done. But if you would like a longer one, I covered the vaults of the Fallout TV series recently, and I think it turned out pretty well. As always, likes and feedback/comments really help both the video's performance and improving the quality of future content, and as such, are greatly appreciated. Now, let's take a gander at what happened here. Immediately on the inside, we can see someone has died against a lectern, and were dressed quite well when they did. This suggests that whatever took them was incredibly sudden, giving them no chance to react. We've seen this before with the blast wave from the bombs, but as will become apparent, this was something altogether different. Additionally, they've got some whiskey and mentats stashed at what we can assume was their desk. Always a winning combination, to be sure. Around them, it's clear that this place was very much set up for a Halloween party, more so than a lot of other places we've came across. Another fellow can be found beside the sofas, and doesn't seem to have succeeded in dying on one. Again, there are no signs of how they died either, but we can assume it was likely of the same sudden nature as our dapper friend back at the lectern, a friend we quickly learn the name of as their terminal is still in working order. We learn their name is J. Pratt, and apparently the motto of this group is where progress meets practicality. This is of course a total crock, as having an AI manage everything with no human oversight is just not practical, as we shall see. The first entry is from the 7th of August, 2077. In it, we are first told of this new AI system from RobCo that can handle all the responsibilities of Mr. Pratt here, making him fear that he'll soon be out of a job, which is a very valid fear, to be fair. We also learn the name of Mr. Went, who as we shall see is the owner of this really not fine establishment. Along with this, we get the huge red flag of Mary Mother of Christ. They want the thing to start learning. The time and time again worst thing you can ever let an AI do, period. Especially when we come to find out what they had it learning from. He finishes by saying at least he can just chill out at the front without having to worry about turning off the lights. Just remember this line for later, okay? The next entry is on the 15th of September, more than a month later. Despite Pratt working here, he apparently is not a full society member. He pretty much has no duties anymore, especially now that they've given the AI a physical presence in the form of a Protectron. Fuck me. You can't make this up. Every move by these progressive visionaries has been carefully calculated to maximize the chance that this ends up killing all of them. At this point, Pratt is a full-on disgruntled employee, although I don't see what the issue is. Yes, he has lost all means of advancement. However, it seems he's been essentially paid to do nothing the last few months, which is a pretty sweet deal. All of this brings us to his final entry. It's from the 22nd of October, 2077, the day before the bombs fell. In it, we do learn that he seems to have some limited responsibility still, though nothing like he did before. He's apparently going to pack it in and become a drummer. Seems to suggest he's quite young, as quitting your job and becoming a drummer in your 40s is a ballsy move. Though given what he does next, maybe he is that ballsy. The AI has got a special event ready for the Halloween party, and has been learning for the past 2 months. He isn't allowed to attend, so he doesn't get to see it. But the last page of the entry is pretty ominous. He seems to have something planned, and this is that component of human idiocy that I was talking about. The mentats and the whiskey seem to be a coping mechanism he uses to deal with all these people he hates. Keep in mind, this party happened the day before the bombs fell, so overall, what we know is that this society has introduced, integrated, and then upgraded a RobCo AI system to not only take over the management of the society, but also learn and plan events for them. This has put Mr. Pratt's job at risk, and he seems to want to get his own back. Surely, this will all turn out well. Now that we've covered the exterior section, let's take a look at the main room, which is where everything goes tits up pretty quickly. As soon as we enter, the whole room fills with gas. Then, to make it worse, a load of ghouls start to clamber out of the woodwork and go straight for the throat, in typical fashion. Ignoring all the other bodies in the room for now, let's talk about these ghouls. First of all, they're all named, which is actually pretty interesting. Actually, we'll come to know all of them over the course of our explorations here. They are the other lovely members of this club. We get the names Dr. Santiago, Petrovic, Blumstein, Anderson, Kawaguchi, and Miss Pennyworth. The last of them is Mr. Wendt himself, a thick glowing one, bursting out of the toilets. This is actually a little odd, as some of the information we get later, as well as the fact that it was boarded up, may imply they've been in here the whole time, like literally they've been stuck in the toilet for the past few centuries. Most of the rest of them have a variety of Halloween masks on, which tracks as they all attended the Halloween party that took place here, excepting Miss Pennyworth, but I think the hat she has on is the stupid one that Pratt referred to. Important to note, this party took place the day before the bombs fell, on the 22nd, so whatever transpired here had already happened before the bombs hit. Also important is for us to stop and just consider the top quality of these Halloween masks. I mean, these ghouls have been roaming and, as we'll see, killing in this building for 2 centuries. Yet despite all of that, these masks still seem to be in pretty good nick. Yes, we've seen other examples of pre-war gear surviving, but rarely when it's being worn by literally the same person who had it before the war. Now, you've already certainly noticed the gas filling the room, as it's already started to poison you. Don't worry, it's all part of the Halloween experience. Aren't you spooked? So now, we can stop ignoring all the bodies in the room and get down to brass tacks. Along the bar to the left, as you enter the room, we find 2 bodies, a man and a woman. Both of them are long dead. One of them, the man, is in a fairly uncomfortable looking position, though to be fair, I may have shot a skeleton, so that could be on me. If it wasn't my fault, death was a sweet release for him, as surely at this point, his spine was as mangled as a slinky. To his right we find another skeleton, and behind them, an excellent example of how well stocked this party was, as the drink is plentiful. In front of them we come to the main arrangement of bodies, and there's a lot of them. Some are sprawled over tables, and some are just on the floor. Honestly, the 2 by the stage kind of look like they just decided to die together, but the skeletons also could have just spawned in wrong. I do think some of these were likely other attendees of the party, as if they weren't, and it was only the ones who became ghouls, then that party was shit and sad as nobody showed up. But if they weren't all there, it raises the question of where they came from, and why they were here. Well, we'll have to keep looking to find out. The last body of interest on this floor is this saucy looking guy at the back. Has a bit of a come hither pose about him, showing even in death, his priorities never changed. Based on the amount of wine at the table, this could very well have been the position they occupied at the moment of their death. Makes me a little uncomfortable, if I'm being honest. Up on the stage, we can find the height of spooking. Mannequins, likely primed to move when you're not looking. Honestly, this is exactly what I would expect out of an AI trying to learn how to scare people, so it just makes what happened later even better. Behind the counter, however, we start to see signs that maybe this place hasn't been as locked up and isolated as we thought. We find the body of a settler against the far wall. It seems like they came here to either hide from the ghouls, or to find somewhere quiet to choke on whatever was being pumped into the air. But it does highlight again that we may not have been the first to come here, that in fact this may have been occurring for some time, as we arrived here after hearing about it on the radio, likely how this group did as well. On the landing above this, we can find 2 bodies. The first is very old, and looks like whatever killed them is the same as the rest of the group here. If it hadn't, then surely falling onto their neck, which only death seems to have prevented, ironically, would have. The next is another settler body. This body stands out for 3 reasons, 2 of which are important. It isn't decomposed, again like the other settler downstairs. It has blood beside it, which could indicate it was recent. Lastly, their hair has gained a form of limited sapience, and seems to be attempting to detach from their scalp. I'll allow you to decide which of these are important things. Last thing to look at here is the toilet. It's a little disappointing, I'll admit. Yes, there are a lot of glowing mushrooms in it, which is usually a sign of higher than normal levels of radiation. This tracks, as Mr. Wendt may very well have been in here the whole time. As we'll see, there may have been a reason for this. Beyond that, it looks like the AI decorated this room as well, possibly in an effort to hasten along bowel movements. One thing of note is the medkit in the walls fallen open, and some stim packs are on the ground. Possibly a sign that Mr. Wendt, before undergoing their change, or while the gas was pouring in, made some attempt to administer them. An attempt that was, ultimately, futile. Now it's time to get into the strange puzzles the AI here set up, and see what happened to some of the other people who attempted it. Immediately, as we walk into the hall, we find another skeleton, but this one's unique in that there's a note. It could be it doesn't actually belong to them, but I think it does. We learn that 4 people came here: Beverly, Charlie, Lana and Raymond. Now, given both of the settlers outside these doors haven't decomposed, I think we can rule them out as their companions. Additionally, Charlie and Lana look like they've been dead a very long time, so likely the other 2 bodies outside were just settlers that showed up here, and Beverly and Raymond are among the bodies out there dead for a while, possibly the 2 that seem to have joined hands before they passed away. These 2 got locked in this hallway with the puzzles, and attempted to figure out the code for the door at the end of the hall. The code is 4 digits, and there are 4 doors with a number of objects in them. Gee, I wonder what possible correlation there could be between the 2. At the very least, it makes it pretty easy for us to figure it out. Then again, we have drugs and such to heal us, so to be fair, it could just be that there simply isn't enough time for the majority of people to get into the rooms and get the number for the digits of the code. The really interesting part is the "oh god, they're coming out of the walls." Now, this is surely a reference to the ghouls. The problem is the door was locked and we don't encounter any ghouls in this section. Granted, we did kill them all, but still, I'm unsure where they'd even come from. But it does tell us that these 4 weren't attendees of the party, and that enough time had passed to allow the full feralization process to take effect on the former partygoers that still lived. It raises the question of how frequently people were coming here, and how many of the bodies here don't belong to people who were at the Halloween party. Now, let's take a look at the puzzle rooms here. All of them, after all this time, have some sort of functioning trap, despite people having been in here to presumably set them off, unless they are recent additions by the AI. But the protectron that it uses as a physical presence is still here, so likely it has been using that to reset or update them. The first room has a Tesla trap in it, along with a sultry looking mannequin in the corner, judging you for failing this puzzle. The specimen jars are very interesting, mostly due to the heart and the bloatfly. First of all, holy shit, is that a horse heart or something? It's way too big to be a human heart. Second, the AI must still be gathering resources, or how else did it get a post-war mutated creature into a jar? Given the security cameras in the rooms, it's clearly still observing and learning, which we'll get to later. The next room has spooky skeletons in it, and I'm pretty sure, apart from the skulls, all of them are bodies of people who have tried and failed this puzzle. And then again, the skulls also could have been taken from people who failed an earlier iteration of the puzzle, though we've seen no headless skeletons lying about. Door number 3 initially looks lovely, just some teddy bears administering some much needed electroshock therapy to their friend after his recent divorce left him in a fugue state, stalking the streets of Bruges for 17 days and throwing his feces at people. Then you spot the champion in the bush to the left and the lad out the back, both of which realised the only way to win was to inject themselves with advanced pharmaceuticals to offset the advanced pharmaceuticals being used to arrest the function of their nervous system. Again, more bodies to stand, or I guess lie about, as testaments to the average person's inability, even after Armageddon, to keep their composure under pressure. The last room has some jack-o'-lanterns in it, and 2 skeletons. Along with the one we'll see in a second, this seems to drive home how fast working this gas, whatever it is, really was. Well, I'll give you a spoiler, but we've actually encountered it before, long ago, in a video before the time of my hiatus. The last thing is the final body sprawled in front of the door. The code is 4346, and it looks like whomever this was died violently, going off of the blood, just before they entered the code. I assume this was Charlie, and the ghouls got to Lana before him. Ultimately, he dropped the ball at the very end, and didn't manage to get in. If he had, he would have found the control terminal of both the AI and the gas, and been able to piece together the story himself. But since he's dead, we'll just have to do it. Inside the AI control room, if you can even call it that, we find, to the left, more masks and hats. Based on the brushes and the chemistry station here, this is where the primary amount of work that went into them was done. There's also a notes, but we'll get to that in a moment. The control terminal for the AI can be found at the back of the room, and to the left of that, a set of stripped down power armor with another of the helmets on it. The note on the table tells us a little more about who worked back here. We get the names of 4 people: Thomas, Richard, James and Sarah, and all of them, unbeknownst to the others, all wanted to dress as something called a decapitalist, which I'm assuming is some sort of counter-capitalist, but I could be wrong. Despite being part of a society that celebrated technology, these half-wits were not themselves capable of setting up the masks, so they're getting this person, whomever they are, to do it. I've no clue who Dr. Brainwash is, but apparently that means they all have to obey him. Suggests that decapitalists are actually make-believe characters from a work of fiction. They were then blackmailed by someone called Charlie. Unless they did as he asked for his costume, he was going to tell everyone what they'd done. Apparently Charlie was also in the military at some point. I don't understand how he isn't still, as there is a war going on, and that power armor, at least in 2077, was still, in the scheme of things, quite new. But he could have just reached retirement age or been injured. They signed off as JR, but beyond that, we don't know who they are. When we do get to the terminal, it turns out to be pretty easy to switch off the AI. We literally just select the option to disable it. When we do, we're told the error system and radio beacon are disabled, and the doors are unlocked, showing that it was the AI controlling all of this. It signs off by saying it must entertain and kill humans. I wonder how it arrived at those prime directives. Lastly, it tells us what our parents constantly do. They aren't mad, just disappointed, which is, as we all know, a lot worse. It seemed to think it was all in good fun, and we'll need to delve into the plethora of terminal entries here to find out why. There are a lot of them, so if you have any issues with just reading terminal entries, let the video play and my soothing tones tell you what's happening, and go and make yourself a cup of tea or a stiff drink, or both. So looking at this terminal, the first thing that jumps out at me is the BIOS version. Have we seen this before? I feel like I can't remember the word BIOS being expressly used on a terminal before, but I could just be imagining that. Now this is a RobCo AI, and was for office automation. The first thing you need to know, that it was not what they eventually used it for. The programmer logs are the first set of entries we shall take a look at. The first is from the 13th of August, 2077, by a Kurt Barlow, a RobCo technician. He's here to implement the AI and enable the learning functionality it has. So yeah, right here, everything just started to go wrong. This is the entry that specifically states that Mr. Went was the head of the club, and the AI was meant to be what the club would revolve around. They wanted to quell people's fears about AI, which was just the wrong move. As in this case, and in many others, those fears were incredibly justified. The next entry is from the 21st, just over a week later. Pretty much everything that could be automated has been, though they admit a few glitches have occurred, although we never learn what they are. Presumably no one has died yet. It's also beginning to learn the club member patterns. The only way this could be linked to the control of the club is that it must have never been told how to operate these things, i.e. when to unlock doors and turn on lights, and was just left to its own devices to figure it out. Hilariously, after all his whining, we do learn that apparently Pratt wasn't as good at his job as he'd like to think, and actually may have deserved to have been automated out of it. His incompetence does seem to have factored in to why they gave the AI a protectron in the first place, so really it's all his fault. It's also here when the AI starts to learn how to spook humans and rustle their jimmies. It may start off with a tame magazine, but it gets a lot worse. The entry after this is from September 14th. Pretty much everything has been automated in only the span of a month, which means Pratt got paid to do nothing for at least that amount of time. A lot of people have been fired, apparently. So good job, Kurt. You made many people redundant in a time of economic downturn in the US of A. The amount of information the AI has been fed has been increasing as well, and it's went from magazines to pretty much just any form of media. It's learned enough to debate the club owner, but to be fair, he could be a total smooth brain, so that may not mean much. Kurt is now also a club member, and is stepping up the learning of the AI in order to prepare for the Halloween party. Apparently some RobCo investors will be attending, so at least we know who some of the bodies belong to now. He says he's going to start giving it crime and horror, but you know, given the war at the time, and he said he fed it current events, I feel like it's already very well acquainted with both topics. So the second last entry is on the 5th of October, and Kurt has also been automated out of a job. The AI no longer needs any maintenance, as it is apparently learning at an exponential pace. No clue why the protectron is, that's a little weird, and a massive oversight, if you ask me. The AI is one thing, but if the protectron gains sentience, pulling the plug is a lot harder. Granted, it's also pretty slow, so maybe not. Kurt is quite sad to go, and the last task he was given was crank up the learning to a maximum. Apparently the previous puzzles and decorations were a bit shit, though given they needed an AI to make them in the first place, they're in no position to complain. Here was where it all went pear-shaped, uploading 100 years of content to it and removing all of the learning limitations. Who knew? He seems a little bitter, as it's clear that Mr. Went thinks he knows better, but he can rest easy, because he's dead, knowing that this last action may have killed everyone at the party, and honestly many other people over the years. The final entry is on the day of the party, and it's from Pratt, and after this entry, they really are aptly named. They're writing the entry just in case the AI can read it, just to tell it they're pissed. Also, they're the only employees left at this point. Now the rest of it goes off the rails. You may remember about 7 or 8 years ago, but probably not, I did a video on Hallucinogen Inc., a weapons lab in Boston. Well, Pratt somehow got a hold of some of their gas which was driving people insane the last time we saw it. Perhaps time to take a look at it again, but he's put it in the air system, open just enough to affect people and likely make them act a bit mental. explains how the AI got a hold of the gas, as it would be really weird how they actually got it, if not for Pratt. How Pratt got it? No clue. Maybe one of the club patrons worked there, and he managed to get them to give him some. Regardless, he was drunk when he wrote the entry, so maybe he was also drunk when he did it. Not an excuse by any means. I mean, we've all been puppeteered by the jungle juice at one point or another, but at least an explanation of his actions. Now, onto the system logs. The first one is from the day it was installed, on the 13th of August, and the learning module has been introduced. It needs data to be input to learn, so it doesn't seem to have anything to draw on by default, or any inbuilt knowledge to start with. After this is the entry on the 19th of August, where we get to see some of what it monitored from people. I don't know why there aren't more, beyond the obvious limitations of how much could be added to the area. Now, the AI seems to have uncovered an affair between Mr. Went and Miss Pennyworth, only a week after activation, so the little one is off to a great start. 26 minutes in the bathroom, though, is hardly subtle. It also caught Pratt not doing their job and stealing drink, so it's already a bit of a tout. Not sure how this data was used to affect the light and sound system. Perhaps some sultry music in the bathroom, with a little mood lighting. Also, given the glowing one we found, who was Mr. Went, was in the bathroom, I can't help but wonder if they were in there waiting for Miss Pennyworth, and then the bombs hit and they got stuck, or the AI was still controlling the doors and trapped them in there, only bringing them out when it needed to. After this is an entry on the 21st of August, and we get some information about how it interprets the data it's fed. It has the data on the interior of the building, not via the cameras, as originally thought, but by the Protectron, which means that without its addition, things may have turned out a little differently. The analysis of the picket fence issue is pretty standard. It's decided it needs to figure out how puzzles work, and we get information that it was indeed the Protectron that was setting all of this up. Not that there was any other real possibility, as all the other poor sods that worked here, barring the next to useless Pratt, had been fired. For some reason, several weeks passed before the next entry, on the 14th of September. This was when its learning capabilities were greatly improved on by Kurt, to prepare for the party. It starts analysing a large swathe of media, such as concluding humans have to dance if music is present, and that werewolves lose control during a full moon. The last page is maybe a sign that things started to go wrong, where it concludes that the unknown leads to fear, which leads to entertainment. It says this is a high priority piece of information. Likely this is what influenced its future choices, including embracing Pratt's plan, as we shall see. The entry on the 5th of October is after Kurt has been asked to crank up the learning capabilities, and then leave, as he's no longer needed. Clearly, Kirk was right, as the system itself even states that letting the machine have these capabilities could lead to unforeseen circumstances, like a bit of a machine uprising. The comment about damage to connected equipment is also interesting. It suggests that, in general, the hardware at the time wasn't capable of keeping up with this thing. Could be a key reason why it went off the rails like it did. After this, we get to see its analysis logs, which I feel are identical to the logs every real-world AI or chatbot must have when people let it learn off of Twitter and Reddit, and like clockwork, concludes humans are arseholes. I mean, really? Horrorfest 2048? Fine. But fuck me, why would you let it learn about the previous century of news? The last line says behavioral systems and Protectron instructions updated, which must be the beginnings of the Halloween party preparations. I think this is more than enough information to tell us that Mr. Went is to blame for all of this, given he was the one that made the demands that it would be allowed to learn from these materials at this rate. Just under 2 weeks later, on the 18th of October, we can see that the AI isn't doing so hot. It appears to be constantly running out of memory and crashing, either due to the process load from its analysis, or the amount of information it's been fed. Regardless, it seems to be caught in a loop of faulting, trying to identify the issues, and then just degrading even further. The current analysis seems to be caught somewhere between it trying to identify elements of Halloween and processing the horror that is human suffering. The second last entry explains exactly what seems to have happened with the gas. The AI detected the gas Pratt put in the air system. It then decided that, due to its conclusion that fear and shock are important to human entertainment, it had to be kept. Not only that it was cranked up to maximum and released as part of a sequence in the party. Just keep in mind here, as this AI has stated, it was more than a hallucinogenic compound. It was poisonous, which likely meant it may have killed some of the partygoers. Not all of them, given the presence of the named ghouls, but enough of them. The final entry is the day the bombs hit, and the day after the party. It flat out says it must kill humans, as well as entertain. So at this point, due to fear, pain and suffering, in its mind, playing a role in entertaining humans, killing them is part of the process as well. It's also here where we get an explanation of why the beacon was broadcasting. It was turned on to lure humans here, and after 2 centuries, when we finally turned it off, still seems to have thought it was doing a good job, if the text we got when we turned it off is any indication. So there we go. Another shining example on the hilltop of why full automation by self-learning AI is always a stellar idea and never, ever backfires. The New England Technocrat Society wanted to use AI to really push the boundaries of the technology involved in said society, so they hired on Kurt, a programmer and technician from RobCo. He was brought in to set up, maintain and modify an existing RobCo AI product, all to the specifications of the club owner, Mr. Wendt. They set the AI to managing and learning everything it could about the club, from when to turn off the lights to cataloguing who was having an affair with whom. Mr. Wendt and Miss Pennyworth definitely seemed to be having one. Whether or not the AI understood this, or just thought this as part of the routine, we don't know. Eventually, it started trying to understand and learn about the concept of human fear and excitement, all to put on a slapping Halloween party. However, at this point, Dunning-Kruger that he is, Mr. Wendt decided to fire Kurt, and he felt the AI didn't need any more oversight. And clearly, he would know more than a literal expert in the field, right? But before this happened, they cranked up the amount of data it was fed, and removed its learning limiters. This is what eventually led the AI to the conclusion that fear always means humans are entertained, and almost being killed, or actually being killed, would of course lead to fear, which means entertainment, in its eyes. This situation was made worse by Pratt, the useless doorman, who somehow got his hands on hallucinogen gas, which as we saw at hallucinogenic, can have some pretty severe effects on a human. We're still not entirely clear how he got some, beyond someone at the club having provided it to him. He, knowing, as far as we're aware, nothing about the complicated interactions between airborne hallucinogenic compounds and the human body, decided it would be funny to set it off at the Halloween party. He admitted as much in the AI terminal, but whether the AI hid the message from the other club members, or they simply were checking the logs, we don't know. Given that Mr. Wendt doesn't really seem to understand the AI, and apart from Pratt, everyone else was let go, I suppose the chances someone would come across the messages are pretty low. Someone called JR was either pestered, or in one case blackmailed, into making many of the masks that we saw in the Ghouls, or at least he was for the decapitalist ones, the large Hamlets. Oddly enough, none of the name Ghouls matched the names on that note, or the initials. It also wouldn't make a lot of sense for us to only get their pseudonyms, given they're long dead. It could simply be all we get are the second names, but then again, the only second name we got was in the initials JR, and none of the Ghouls had a name beginning with R, so it could simply be other club members who managed to get their own Hamlets somehow, or they got them off the corpses of those named in the letter. On the topic of the Ghouls, it's important to note that, if they were partygoers, then the gas, even on high, didn't kill all of them. I say all of them as at least some of the bodies looked like they could have been pre-war, and the party likely would have been fairly full, given we are told RobCo investors were coming. Given the bombs dropped the next day, the combination of likely large amounts of violence, given the gas, and the radiation from the fallout, killed off at least some of them, and set the rest on the path to ghoulification. The AI also talked about needing to entertain and kill more humans when it decided to turn on the beacon, so must have at least taken out some of them. The rest may have been trapped here due to the AI, or they turned quickly enough that they never attempted to leave. I think Mr. Wendt was likely waiting to rendezvous with Miss Pennyworth and got trapped inside the toilets. I think he's been stuck in there the whole time, and it was only either the AI deciding to let him out, or the racket we were making that finally released him. The door to the toilet was boarded up, so either the AI used the protectron to do it, and triggered it to blow, or the ghoul broke it open. Alternatively, the other people here who survived the initial party and radiation may have boarded him up in here, as he may have started turning before the rest of them. It's hard to say exactly how many people the AI lured here over the years. We know, if all the bodies were real, that at least 6 people made it all the way to the puzzle rooms and died. I say 6 as we can't be sure whether the 2 skeletons in the skull room were from people or fake, and whether the same can be said for the heads. We also know that there were at least 2 somewhat recent deaths, given the bodies of the settlers here. Something else to mention is that as far as we are aware, the gas was used every time, but I doubt that Pratt could have gotten a massive amount of it, and it's being used at a much higher level than he'd intended to. So if there were loads of people over the years, there should be no more gas left. This suggests that it's only been a few events over the past few years, with the AI sitting in a darkness that suits it the rest of the time. But over the centuries, people came here, were led here, were trapped here, exposed to a highly poisonous substance and forced to race against the clock, completing some, let's be honest, pretty shit puzzles. If not for the Ghouls, I expect the success rate would have been higher, and the AI turned off a long time ago. But they were here, and it wasn't. So it fell to us to finally flip the switch and turn off the most aggressive party organizing AI in all of the Commonwealth.